Welcome back, chess friends, to 1834, where McDonnell and Labourdonnais are playing their unofficial World Chess Championship match. It is currently 9 games to 2 to Labourdonnais, who's looking very pleased with himself. And yeah, McDonnell's not looking too happy. I think my stand-ins, Zero Mostel and Father Dougal, are doing a good job of representing the emotions that these guys are feeling. Well, will McDonnell manage to fight his way back? At least one game. Let's see, we have e4, c5, f4, so Sicilian McDonnell attack again. So we have seen this a few times, so I'm just going to hammer through these moves and not dwell on them too much. e6, knight to f3, knight to c6, c3, d5, e5, f6, knight to a3, knight to h6, and of course knight to c2. And as recommended by Morphy, queen to b6, d4, closing up the center, bishop to d7, and knight to e3, which causes Morphy to comment. He says, "As has been remarked in a note to one of the preceding games, this move is premature. White's true course was to deploy his forces and castle as speedily as possible." So he's saying maybe bishop to e2 or bishop to d3, allowing castling. Even McDonnell ended up saying that this move was premature in his letter to Mr. Walker that we went through a few videos ago. So Morphy's not the first to say that this is wrong, and he's probably not going to be the last. In fact, he's not the last because I just talked about it. So we carry on. We have C captures, and Morphy comments again. "To have retaken with knight would hardly have been better. The line of play adopted by White in the opening is so radically bad that no deviation from his usual routine afterwards can improve his game." So thank you, Morphy. So we have captures with the c-pawn, and now bishop to b4, check, and of course he doesn't like blocking with the bishop, so king to f2. And now Labourdonnais likes to castle here, but we know that f capturing would be better because then after castling there'd be less pieces between the rook and the king. But he castles first, and again we know that capturing by McDonnell first here would be better, but he goes to king to g3, moving his king a second time. He really should think about developing some pieces, but hey ho. We have f captures, and now h4. Oh, sorry, not h4, we have rook to c8. Now we have h4. And so all these moves were played exactly the same in game 14. It is at this point that Labourdonnais goes for a new move. He goes rook captures on f3 with check, so very exciting. And of course Morphy comments. He says, "A sound sacrifice. Black wins a pawn in return for the sacrifice of the exchange and obtains a good attacking position." So thumbs up from Morphy. We have captures back with the pawn. And again he comments, "The best mode of capturing the rook. Had White taken with the queen instead, Black would still have further advanced his game by queen captures on d4 and so on." So again, double thumbs up from Morphy. And we continue with knight capturing on d4. So yeah, Black has captured, he's got more pawns than White now, but he is still down a rook instead of a horse. And how do we carry on here? We go bishop to d3, finally developing the bishop here, and then we have rook to f8. And this has 2 attackers on this pawn to 2 defenders, but one of the defenders is the queen, so this isn't comfortable for McDonnell. He gets out of this by pushing f4, which means there's only 1 attacker to 1 defender on the pawn, but the queen is now free from this responsibility. We carry on with bishop to c5 and then rook to f1, and Morphy comments. He says, "McDonnell has a difficult game. b4, which he played on his 25th move, would have done him better service at this stage." So this is move 18, so McDonnell is talking about 7 moves from now. McDonnell will finally play this, so foreshadowing, but it would have been better now. But we have rook to f1 instead. Bishop to b5, and Morphy says, "An excellent move, compelling an exchange of bishops which materially weakens White's position and strengthens the attack." So as Morphy says, exchange of bishops. And we continue with the king getting out of the way to h3. And I think this is because He's scared of the knights coming into these squares with check, because this will give tempo to labourdonnais, and after the check the knights will be able to go anywhere they like, so forking all over the place. McDonnell avoids this by going to h3 now instead of just walking into these. But regardless, labourdonnais plays knight to e2, and now McDonnell plays his knight to g2, and Morphy says, "We are surprised that McDonnell should not have first played a4, forcing the queen back to a6, whence she could not easily have been brought over to the point of attack on the king's side of the board." So what he's saying here is, on this square, the queen will be able to come here and over to here and start really attacking the king. But if it was forced back to this square, the pawn is blocking it, and so it's not so easy to get over there. Okay, so McDonnell didn't play that, he played knight g2 instead. And we continue with knight to f5 and king to h2, and the other knight comes in here, backed up by his friend, and McDonnell doesn't like this too much, so he plays rook to f3, challenging the knight. There's two attackers on the knight here and only one defender, so the knight retreats to e4. And we have queen to f1, offering an exchange here, but labourdonnais wants to keep his queen for the attack, so he goes queen to e8, as we said, heading to the h5 square. And you'll notice that we still have undeveloped pieces here on McDonnell's team. He really wants to get this rook out, so he pushes b4. He doesn't mind giving up the pawn to get his rook out because it's just useless in the corner. But labourdonnais likes his bishop on this diagonal because it's pointing towards the king's side. He wants to keep it on this diagonal, so he goes bishop to d4, which attacks the rook. So the rook goes to b1. And now we have, as we mentioned before, queen to h5. And you'll see like everything is just going towards these 9 squares in the corner of the board. Maybe the rook is slightly off to the side here. Maybe labourdonnais can do something better with that. So we have rook to b3. McDonnell wants to double up his rooks to help with the defense along the third rank. Rook to c8 on the open file, heading towards c2, so he can bring even more weaponry to bear from a completely new direction. This bishop here still hasn't moved. It's still stuck on c1 the entire game, so McDonnell finally moves it up to e3 here. Labourdonnais doesn't care, he comes to c2 as we said, and now the knight's pinned. So McDonnell decides to unpin by moving his king to g2, but now he's suffering an x-ray attack here. But regardless of that, labourdonnais just captures the bishop straight away. And now McDonnell's in a bit of trouble here, in fact a lot of trouble. If this knight moves now, it comes with check, so the knight's going to be able to just go anywhere it likes and cause all sorts of damage and danger. So McDonnell decides to avoid that by capturing with the rook, but straight away the rook's now pinned, so the rook can't move. McDonnell will be able to take this anytime he likes if he wants to, so he decides not to take it straight away. He goes knight to d2, which attacks the queen. So McDonnell gets the queen out of there, queen to d3. He's lined up all his strong pieces along this file, but the power is deceptive along the right-hand side of the board because this rook is pinned. We'll see how this works out. We have check on c1. The king can't come to here because it's instant checkmate. This rook is pinned, remember, and all the other squares are covered, so just checkmate. And he spots this, and he decides to go to h2 instead. And you've probably seen already, this walks into a fork. And so this rook is looking extremely finished. He moves to h3 to get out of the check, and the knight captures the rook, and he captures back with a knight, but this is horrible because the queen comes in with a check, and white's only got one move left. So McDonnell moves to h2, and you've probably seen already, the rook can deliver checkmate here on h1. So the Bourdonnais goes up another point, 10 games to 1. McDonnell's not looking very pleased. He is, in fact, probably quite sad. But the Bourdonnais is going to spend all night drinking and gambling with his friends again. So thank you very much for joining me for Game 16, and I'll see you again next time.